You know what you're listening to?
Is that a trick question?
It's the I Still Love This Game podcast with your host, Matthew Damian.
He's an idiot. Don't listen to this. He's an idiot.
Hello and welcome to episode 93 of the I Still Love This Game podcast. Today's show, we've got I don't even know if we can call him a frequent guest anymore because it's been so long since we've had him on. But Matt Hanley is the guy that wrote the introduction to my very first book, and a guy that I've had plenty of great basketball discussions with. He knows his stuff. And today we're going to be discussing basketball in the 80s, and Matt Hanley is an old man. So who better to have on than Mr. Matt Hanley? Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks very much. I appreciate that. Good to be back.
What we've got you on the show,
is great.
Yeah, what we've got you on the show for is to talk about 80s basketball. And for far too long, I've noticed people when they're including Magic or Bird in their top 10s, typically Magic is a lot higher, which I don't have a problem with him being higher, but a lot higher that I have an issue with. And it's kind of like a token inclusion or selection, and they don't really know how important Magic and Larry Bird were to the NBA, and that's one, and number two, how great these players were. So I know you appreciate both of these guys, so I really wanted to get you on, and I know you've got some pretty strong and maybe controversial, not to me because I've heard them so many times, but maybe controversial stances on how these two can't be separated.
Okay, well, sure, but can I ask for a point of clarification first? When you said Magic being a token inclusion, in top 10, top 5 lists, or what?
Well, what I mean by that is a lot of fans don't exactly know how good this guy was. So they just...
it was less... they used to tape delay the finals for goodness sake.
Yeah, well, that's no excuse, though, because, I mean, I didn't get to watch this guy either. So the point that I'm making is, without an understanding of how good he was, obviously back-to-back, not just finals MVP, but regular season MVP, he won 3 regular season MVP awards, really revolutionized not just the position of point guard, but the game of basketball, because he was able to figure out, hey, I'm going to play the game my way, my skill set, and I'm going to see what my teammates need and what holes are in the team, and I'm going to fill those holes. Larry Bird was the same. So a lot of fans don't realize that, and they just put them in because you can't have a top 10 without Magic or Larry Bird. So that's why I say it's kind of a token selection in many cases.
Because they're maybe just don't understand that this guy was not just playing against accountants and bookkeepers. He was actually the same argument used against Will Chamberlain, even though the centers of the era are statistically the same height, relatively, maybe an inch different. So you're saying it's like maybe even an ageist bias.
Yeah, well, not so much an ageist, because they still. I mean, if it's an age bias, then why am I, so respectful to him? But
you're more the exception than the rule, I would say to that. But yes.
God damn it, I don't want to be the exception. Now, I was thinking
you're
about
just exceptional.
This. Yeah, thanks, Matt. Now, what I was thinking about this. And I'm not in the habit of doing hot takes or anything like that. So this is authentic and it's genuine. I think that Jordan is the greatest player of all time. And I have Wilt at number 2. And a lot of people are shocked at that. You're not shocked at that, I know. But I know a lot of people are shocked at that. That being said, if I can pick any 2 players, not just one player, because that's my criteria of where I would rank players. So if I had the choice of picking anyone, it'd be number 1 would be Jordan, number 2 would be Wilt. But if I could pick any 2 players in NBA history to play alongside each other for my franchise, it would be Magic and Larry Bird.
Wouldn't that be something?
It would be beautiful.
Jeez.
It would be beautiful. The basketball, it would be just poetic, just to watch the ball move around the court, the intelligence level on both ends of the court. I mean, these guys weren't great athletes. I mean, a lot of people think that Magic had a great athletic advantage over the opposition, because the guy was 6'9".
Well, he did when he was young,
yeah.
In his youth, but, after 5-6 years, he became more of the bigger, power, a little more power to his game, like, say, 87, but when he was young, like, first 2 or 3 years in the league, he was, Pat Riley used to call him Buck,
Yep.
He was like a young buck out there running, jumping. He was actually quite good athletically, as opposed to what we saw him in later years, where he was a little slower, a little bigger, still great, but just his game changed.
He wasn't an athletic 6'9". He was athletic, I'll give you that. But when you look at some of the great, like when I say he wasn't an athletic 6'9", he wasn't like a Dr. J, he wasn't like a Penny Hardaway or a LeBron James or players like that who. You look at him, you're like, shit, if they were 6'1", 6'2", with their athleticism, they'd still be considered great athletes.
Like Charles Barkley, for example.
Oh, that's another great example.
And being able to do what he did.
Now, the question I wanted to ask you, I know you're aware
of Magic and separating, or no?
Well, we'll get to that in a minute. But
okay,
the question I wanted to ask you is, a lot of people don't know this actually. When they think of Larry Bird as strictly as a 3, a small forward, and this is back in the era where positions mattered a lot. What position you were meant typically the role you would play on the team. But when he came in, McHale was coming off the bench. McHale wasn't even drafted actually, technically, but he was coming in off the bench. McHale was coming
drafted by the Celtics. You mean?
Yes, and. So
because you got to make that distinction. You can't, McHale not being drafted without qualifying.
No. McHale was drafted by the Celtics. He was. They had. Wasn't he part of the Joe Barely Cares trade?
I wasn't sure if he was.
Parrish was already in the league.
Picked.
No, Parrish was
picked.
Yes. Yeah, Parrish was already in the league, and he was packaged up. And Joe Barely Cares went number 1 to Golden State, and then they used the number 3 pick, who was part of that package, to bring in McHale. So no, you're right. I think they came in the same year then, didn't they? Bird and McHale. But the point I was going to make is McHale was actually coming in off the bench to start his career, and Cornbread Maxwell, one of the great nicknames of all time, he was starting small forward. Larry Bird was the starting power forward for the Celtics. Now, it was just another example of Bird, just like Magic, understanding what his team needed. Now, if Magic was drafted to a team that not named the Los Angeles Lakers with Kareem, Norm Nixon, Jamal Wilkes,
among the media capitals of the world, by the way.
Oh well, I'm just talking about the
Hollywood.
I'm just talking about the offensive talent surrounding Magic. If he was traded,
but I'm also talking about the obvious advantage of publicity that he would have gained playing in Los Angeles as opposed to a smaller market as Boston.
Yes. The point that I wanted to bring to you, though, is we saw Magic develop his game and adjust it accordingly, but what would have happened had he been drafted by a team that didn't have so much offensive talent? Do you think he would have developed as a scorer?
Oh, yeah, I'd say so. I mean, I think we agree he does what the team needs. I mean, It took him a while in LA. He had some mistakes. Obviously, his first finals, he was finals MVP, but then he had the tragic Johnson episode.
Yeah.
What was that? What year was that?
83?
84.
And so James Worthy had his moments in that too, that series.
Yes. Yeah, well, you either let those moments define you or you come back from it and make them improve, which is what both of those guys did. But, yeah, what can I say?
Do you think... No, but the point, the question I was sort of getting at is, do you think that had Magic not been in LA, and forget the media capital of the world, or the entertainment capital of the world, excuse me, and at least the capital of the basketball interest of the world as well, even though Boston obviously has the better resume in terms of championships, everyone knows that, the center of the basketball world is Los Angeles. Had he been on a team... I guess what I'm saying is, do you think he would be
where he had less talent, where he had to assert himself
do you think,
more?
Could you see him playing the position of really being the first point forward in NBA history? Because we know he's 6'9". Do you think he could have fit that role and playing more of a post, but bring the ball up too?
Yes, I do. Maybe not so much as a post player. Like I sort of think that would lessen his effectiveness to primarily play him in the post on offense. Because as I said, when he was younger, he was pretty athletic, and he could get where he needed to get, if you want to use that terminology. But I believe he could. You know, he wasn't a great shooter, but he had the kind of court vision where he could not only set up his teammates, but he could take advantage as well. I mean, I think Magic took a particular liking. You know, he really enjoyed seeing his teammates score, but if he needed to win, I think Magic is as much a winner as anybody who ever played the game.
I think that's well said. Yeah, I think that's really well said when you say that Magic's one of the more fearless players. We don't associate with him, but when it's been time for him to step up, I mean, just think of him as a rookie. You know, Kareem gets injured in Game 5. He takes over Game 5. Kareem comes back out in Game 5, and they finish off the Sixers, and they go up 3-2. They go into Philly, and he understood the moment there. And he jumped center. I mean, that was just purely symbolic. He sat in Kareem's seat on the plane, purely symbolic.
That's right.
I mean, there's very few players in the history of the game. Maybe Bill Russell, maybe Larry Bird. I guess potentially maybe Jordan in the latter years. But I couldn't see Jordan starting center and understanding the psychological impacts that starting center would have on his team.
I was just thinking of him like taking the seat of, you know, if he was in Magic's position, how he would have assumed the leadership role, like sitting in Kareem's seat on the team bus. You know, like I think Jordan wouldn't have had a problem with that. But yeah, I really honestly think that Magic would have succeeded in pretty much. He's one of the players who are talented and good. And just, you know, a fantastic basketball player. He would have made it work whatever situation, except maybe on the Clippers. That might have been too big of a challenge.
Even then, I know you're sort of kidding there, but even then, I wouldn't put it past him. I wouldn't put it past him in any situation because
I wouldn't bet against him. No, absolutely.
He was just too intelligent. He was just far too intelligent on the basketball court. He could understand, as I said, like even off the court, he would understand. Like, you know, as I said a second ago, you know, sitting in Kareem's seat on the plane. And this is him as a rookie. We need to underline that. We need to underscore that.
That's right.
We could understand a 30-year-old or a 35-year-old that's been in the league for 10, 15 years getting the impact. And he was a young rookie then too. People might not realize what a young rookie he was. He was, 19 years old?
That's 20? Right. Yeah, he was still in his teens. So that's a pretty remarkable accomplishment to go in amongst a locker room full of grown men. And
yeah, we're not talking about Tumblr nerds that we have now. We're not talking about these, you know, SJWs that you see in the NBA now. We're talking about real.
These are alpha males. Yeah, and he goes up and he's like, I'm the man. I'm going to do this. We're going to do it together. And the leadership that entails is just astounding.
42 points, 42 points, 15 rebounds, 7 assists. That's what he came up with in that Game 6. That's an unbelievable stat line for anybody. I mean, it blows my mind. It really does, because it was that good of a performance. And the most important thing is they walked out of there with the victory. They sealed the title up. And up until that point, the Lakers have been considered really a losing franchise since they moved to Los Angeles. Obviously, in Minneapolis, they had won, I think it was 5 titles with George Mikan, and maybe if you ever want to make the argument that there was plumbers,
that far.
But yeah, that's what I said. If you ever want to make the argument that there was plumbers and accountants in the league, that's when it was during the George Mikan years. But you know, once they moved to Los Angeles, you know, you had Baylor, you had West. They made the finals. I don't know how many times when losing. They won
7
year.
times.
That was a lot. I think it was 7 or 8 times, and then they brought in Chamberlain, and they lost not just to the Celtics, but they lost to the Knicks, and then the Bucks ascended, and they won a title, and it wasn't until 72 that they won a title, but then it was all those years before they had won again, and it took something like Magic to really grab it by the scruff of the neck at the age of 19 or 20. I should have looked this up. Excuse me. It's one of those two. And,
why don't you have your studio guy having all these stats ready for you? Come on, where's the preparation?
He's frozen outside. It's snowing outside. So it's just incredible though to think of what he could have done. And then the other question that comes to my mind is, had he been in another situation, I think he would have demolished the record book so much more, because if he's scoring the ball more, if he doesn't have to throw the ball into Kareem or give the ball up consistently to a James Worthy the way that he does it, who's to say he wouldn't have controlled the game? It would have been so much different. It just really would have. I like the concept that you brought up a second ago, where you said that he may not have brought the ball up too many times, or as much as what he did, but he would have controlled the game via the mid post, because he's such a good post player. And I mean,
I was saying I wouldn't want to see him exclusively in the post, but he can definitely move around the mid-range area, and the vision to not only set up his teammates but to take advantage for himself. I do believe he would have had that capability. And remember Adrian Dantley? That guy was 6'5", and he used to post up, and he was averaging 25, 27 points as a 6'5" post player with minimal athleticism. So
he was quick. He had a quick first step, but I get what you're saying. He didn't have. He
wasn't dunking on people. He wasn't Charles Barkley.
Yeah, no, that's true. I see what you're saying, though. He played under the rim. No, I get what you're saying there. That's a fair point. Now, let's get back to the Bird discussion. So we've talked quite a bit for Magic. Now, in terms of Larry Bird, what makes him a special basketball player in your eyes?
Well, I mean, the obvious is the skin color. No,
I mean, seriously.
No, well, if you look at what was that when Rodman said he'd be just another good player. Yeah. So the fact of the matter is, this guy went out there and he competed at the top levels, despite not being the most athletic. This man had one of the greatest minds for basketball that we've ever seen. He was just a phenomenal tactician. He understood, and he was similar to Magic with the same sort of leadership skills. He's the one who called out his team after they got their ass handed to them in 84, right?
Yes.
We played like a bunch of sissies. This guy, he was essentially, I see him as sort of Magic's mirror image. These two brought out the best in each other. They drove each other to be the best they could be, because they didn't want neither one wanted to lose to the other. Unfortunately, someone did have to lose.
I like that a lot, where you called them a mirror image, and I think that's why it really galvanized not just the basketball world, but really the sporting world, because they were so close. And maybe you know what? I laughed at you a second ago. Maybe you're right. Maybe the only difference was skin color between the two guys.
Well, I mean, I think that in my mind, a lot of people, the whole judging a book by its cover, I'm sure that, and he was known as the Great White Hope and all that stuff, just to be completely honest about this, people in Boston, they do have a bit of there is a backstory, Bill Russell mentioned it at times, but they were perfect. Each of them were perfect in the places where they were, and I think that together they brought the league a whole new level of popularity because of the high levels they attained.
No, I'm with you. I'm with you on that. I'm visualizing something, and I want to make sure that I word it correctly when I present it to you. Often, a true test of a player, when you're comparing players, right, is how would they do if we switched them? So, for example, Kobe versus LeBron. how would the Lakers have gone had they had switched up Kobe Bryant with LeBron James in the early 2000s? And I think they would have gone terribly because LeBron, well, as we know, he's very good when he's surrounded by shooters. We haven't seen him play well with somebody who can't shoot well like Shaq. And would he defer? So on paper, you might think, well, Jesus, LeBron's a quote-unquote pass-first guy, quote-unquote has excellent basketball IQ, but and quote-unquote is a great closer. All those things are brought into question, and I don't think maybe they get one title, but I don't think they get three if you switch them up.
I don't know. I remember when Kobe wanted to be traded. He wanted to be traded to Chicago, or there was even rumors of going to the Clippers.
Right, but I'm talking about the first three.
Because I'm thinking LeBron would have probably taken that opportunity.
Oh, of course he would have.
Just to be a bit vindictive, I guess.
Yeah,
but
I could see
I don't think he would have hung around.
I don't think he wouldn't be. I don't think we would have seen a LeBron versus Shaq rivalry the way that we saw Shaq and Kobe publicly. But I think, he would have bowled at the first opportunity. But what I was sort of visualizing,
just based upon his recent history, is why.
Well, his entire history, not just recent, but his entire history. But the reason I brought that up as an example is if we switched up Larry Bird and put him on the Lakers, and then we put Magic on the Celtics. I know this is probably sacrilegious to you because you being a lifelong Laker fan, but if we did that, I think we would have seen almost identical results.
Well, about being a lifelong Laker fan, as much as I hated the Celtics in the 80s, being a prototypical Laker fan, I developed a very high respect for them.
How did that happen?
Squad. Well, it's you start off hating your opponent, but it becomes a begrudging respect, because they proved repeatedly that they were worthy, not James worthy,
right.
but they
I get you saying. Did it ever cross your mind that, or is this part of the respect factor, that they made the Lakers better, and vice versa, clearly, but them toughening up the Lakers in the 84, and one of the hardest series I'm sure a fan could probably go through, because on paper, and you mentioned this before the Rambus foul by McHale and the Sissy comments, they were really controlling that series, and they shouldn't have lost.
They were the superior team.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's pretty well regarded, but that's sort of the beauty of the game, in that it's not played on paper. These are there's people competing out there, and they're not going to. They don't care what your statistics or what you say or your quotes. None of that matters when you step out on the floor. And the Celtics were brilliant, and I think Larry Bird in particular, I give him a lot of credit for that, with his comment, and McHale throwing the clothesline, but it absolutely made the Lakers better. Look, the comments were Kareem was washed up. The next year he goes out and they win in Boston. They were definitely motivated.
Well, what was it? The Memorial Day massacre?
To me, the worst moment for me as a Laker fan was losing on Ralph Sampson's prayer in '86. That was rock bottom. I was like, oh my God. You see the pictures of Michael Cooper laying on the floor like he's devastated. That's how I felt. But
well, I think and this is what was so special about that rivalry. Celtics fans were upset by that too. I think they wanted to go through the Lakers to reclaim their title. This is why it's such a special time in terms of, and this is why I call it the golden era in NBA history, is as good as the Rockets were, and Ralph Sampson, Hakeem Olajuwon at the time, they were a good team. Don't get me wrong; they were a scary team in their own. If you want to justify them as such, I mean, they needed a bit more scoring in the backcourt, then they really would have been a scary team. But
yes,
that's the first time we saw on an NBA level two centers really dominating the middle the way they did. But that being said, they were considered an afterthought or much lesser competition than what the Lakers were. And that shot, you called it a prayer. And it's kind of like what needed to happen for the Lakers to lose, outside of losing to the one of the greatest teams in NBA history, whether it was the Celtics or the 76ers. But I would put to you that loss in 84 did to the Celtics what the bad boy Pistons did for the Bulls in the 90s, and they toughened them up, and they made them better in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. Back then, though, these dynasties didn't last like they do now, with the Larry Bird digging his own mom's driveway.
I know, right?
AIDS, steroids potentially, but
we'll see that soon enough.
I don't think we've had back then. It just didn't seem to go on as long. Like, say, for example, with these Warriors now, like, what are we looking at? What, 5 years?
4
in a row?
No,
is it 4?
It's been
2015.
It's been the 2000. They've been to the finals 4 straight years. They've won 3 titles.
Yeah, so this year would make it 5.
Yeah, there you go.
Assuming that they get there, which I'm thinking is a pretty safe assumption.
You and your safe picks, Matt. But what the question that I wanted to also ask you is, and I know this is a difficult question, but that's why I'm asking it to you. But if you're starting a franchise and you have no other players, try not to be a Laker fan. Try to be objective here. But you're starting a franchise, no coach, nothing, but you have the choice between Magic or Larry. Which one do you take?
And so this is like an expansion franchise.
There you go. Yes, absolutely. That's a good way to put it.
Well, geez. That's you flip a coin, right? I mean,
yeah.
I'd be happy with either one. If I had to choose, I'd go Magic because I'm I grew up with the guy, but I'd be more than happy to have Bird as my star of my new team.
Right.
You can't go wrong, I don't think. I mean, they both their peak was just brilliant, both of them. Obviously, I wish it would have lasted longer for both, but that's the breaks of the game. Maybe I might go Bird if we're playing in today's rules, just because of the outside shooting.
Do you think Magic could have developed that though?
Had he focused on it? We've seen that form of his, the set shot, the shot put look, and maybe guys wouldn't bother him, but I think Birds might be better in today's game.
All I'm thinking is, you see how effective LeBron has been in the last couple of years, at least offensively, in what he's been able to...
With the step-back threes and such?
Well, not just that, but just using his size as the primary ball handler in Cleveland, especially after Kyrie Irving was gone. I can't help but think, imagine somebody with Magic's intelligence and skills in terms of handling the basketball, what he'd be able to do in terms of running an offense. I think I would probably go Magic slightly. I get what you're saying about Bird. I mean, my God, you could put him at center in today's game.
For real.
And that's a quote that Jordan actually said. I have a book where he was quoted saying that when he's asked about what his top starting 5 would be, and he always places Bird ahead of LeBron. And people are like, are you crazy? This is a few years ago, by the way, before everyone jumps on him for this.
Who said this?
Michael Jordan. And Jordan said, you guys are wrong. You don't know basketball if you don't understand how good Larry Bird was. And he said the scary thing about it is, I don't know if he's a 3 or a 4. And if you're talking about a 4 from the 80s or potentially the 90s, then my God, he could easily play the 5 in today's game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he did it all, on both ends of the court. I mean, you'd be crazy not to give the man his due, or just ignorant, I guess.
Do you think some of that ignorance is creeping back with people that didn't see it? They just see this scrawny, mullet, and he's obviously white, and they might think, oh, well, he's just, to quote Dennis Rodman, just another white guy. If they never saw him play, they maybe that perception is creeping back.
Well, I would say so. How many people go back and watch those old videos?
I do.
Outside of this conversation.
Outside of this, there you go. Look, when I look at these two guys, and I think everything you said before about their intelligence and how they elevated the game. Before I get to that point that I wanted to make, before I forget it, what you were saying before about Bird and his peak. But that was a sneaky little pun in there. but the Bird,
his widow's peak.
Yeah, there you go. No, anyway, before I say anything bad, no, but Bird and his peak. When he's the only guy in the modern era. So I'm talking about 3-point line and beyond. That has won 3 straight regular season MVP awards. He was such a phenomenal player. If you look up his stats truly don't do him justice, because that's now what I wanted to get into. Is you talk about their feel for the game and how they understood, and they never played for stats. They weren't like LeBron or Westbrook or James Harden of today's game that they were looking for stats. They were looking for stats for validation.
It's all wins.
Absolutely,
wins were all that mattered.
Absolutely, and that's why people look at that era, and that's why Jordan, Isaiah Thomas, that's why they were so desperate to win, because they knew exactly what that meant. It wasn't okay to put up huge stat lines and lose. You know, Larry Bird, potentially his best season of all time was the 87 season, when you look at the stats. And that's when Magic finally dethroned him from the regular season MVP award, and he claimed his first MVP award. That's the Junior Skyhook series, by the way.
Right.
And
that was what a series.
We'll get to that shot. I think that might be top 2 or 3 shots in NBA history. But the point I'm making is Bird viewed that as such a catastrophic failure of a season, despite the numbers, despite, going down swinging to a vastly superior team at that point. I think 87, the Lakers were vastly superior to the Celtics. But he didn't use that as an excuse. He was still disgusted that they lost. He felt in his heart that they should have won. I love that competitive spirit. I love it. I wish they played better. They played more like that now. I would give anything from a sports fan related. I wouldn't give my life or anything like that. But I would love nothing else to see some fire, some intensity where it actually mattered. And that's what I hate.
Kind of like Field of Dreams for basketball, where you get these guys out and they just... their avatar, not 2K, but they just go out there and they just give it their all. Imagine watching the original Dream Team in '92, like those sort of matchups where it was go out there.
When you look at Magic, for example, during the '92, I'm glad you brought that up. I wasn't even going to bring that up. The Dream Team, Bird was done at that point, right? Magic had to retire the season, just at the start of that season in the preseason, due to the HIV virus, and he went back to the All-Star game, picked up the All-Star game MVP, which is a great moment and all that. He's planning a comeback. He wasn't really talking about it during the Olympics, but he was planning a comeback for the next season, which never happened because it was just a lot of, and I get why the players were sort of, skeptical and borderline afraid of what could happen.
Thanks, Karl Malone.
Well, no, I get where he was coming from with that too, because it wasn't a whole lot of information, and it was considered an epidemic, and people were dying horrible deaths because of this. And but Magic, we're talking about exhibition games. This is the greatest team assembled in team sports history, without question. I mean, Jordan said it best when he said, "You're talking about." 12 or 11, we can't include Christian Laettner in this, but 11 first ballot Hall of Famers. Not just Hall of Famers, but 11 first ballot Hall of Famers. And Magic was already a 5-time world champion, multiple-time regular season MVP, multiple-time finals MVP. He had done it all. He was the king of the hill for so long. And he sees Jordan coming up. And Jordan's now ascended to that, especially with Bird's decline and his absence from the NBA, his own personal absence from the NBA. So what does he do? The competitive bastard that he is, he seeks out Jordan in every situation he can. He's always on the opposing team from Jordan. He always wants to do shooting drills and games against Jordan. He wants to beat Jordan. We're talking about practice. They showed more intensity, the Dream Teamers, in practice than what we see in NBA Finals games.
You mean nowadays?
Yes.
with the switch, anytime a pick gets set like within 5 feet. Oh, let's switch.
Yeah. George Hill, you guard, or Kevin Love, you guard, or Tristan Thompson, you guard Kevin Durant.
Yeah, you get roasted.
Yeah. I've got my valuable matchup of Andre Iguodala here. Make sure he doesn't hurt us. Unbelievable.
15 years in the league, I gotta, protect myself.
Yeah, high basketball IQ.
Offenses.
Yeah. So, let's not...
This is the part where we're gonna get killed, I'm sure.
That's fine. But let's divert away from that, because I don't want to talk about that idiot. But
no, of course not.
Yeah,
let's talk about something like that.
Real basketball, yeah.
Real basketball.
So, the example that I wanted to bring up to you, though, or the question, excuse me, is... the NBA had plenty of talent in the 80s, right? You had, obviously, Bernard King. You had Isaiah Thomas. You had Dr. J, who was still very productive, at least in the early parts of the 80s.
Yep.
Towards the latter end, you had Michael Jordan, who was very productive. And you had other players like Clyde Drexler. We talked about him before as Akeem Olajuwon, Ralph Sampson. You had plenty of talent throughout the league. Barkley is another one too, by the way. And Moses Malone, my God, I nearly forgot about him. He was dominant in the first part of the 80s. And also we had players like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Andrew Toney.
Yeah, there's another one. Yeah, the Boston Strangler. There you go. There's another one.
Yep.
But you also had Kareem. But the 80s and basketball is synonymous with Bird and Magic. And that tells you just how great these two were, that they were able to... Everyone else was an afterthought. Just like Jordan in the 90s, and this includes Hakeem, of course, they were all considered an afterthought. And I think that's...
Well, early part of the 80s, sorry to cut you off there, but,
sure.
I think it really gets lost just how good those Sixers teams were. They were 1-1 against the Lakers, for one thing. Magic...
No, they were 1-2. No, they were 1-2. They lost in 82 as well as 80, and they won in 83.
Oh, okay, my bad.
No, you're fine.
I only started watching around 85-ish. Yeah, I think it was 85. So I need to bone up on my YouTube. But those Philly squads were, so underrated now. If you look at what they did in pushing the Celtics in the way they have, and I say Dr. J, I think he's criminally underrated as well.
Thank you for saying that. I feel like I'm a man without a country when I talk about how underrated that Dr. J was. But thank you for saying that.
Well, I see Jay as sort of the prototype of Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
He was smoother. Jordan was explosive. Dr. J seemed to just sort of glide. Like it looked so effortless for him. But he did so much on the floor. And he gave those Celtics, he gave Bird, he gave them all everything they can handle. I mean, yeah, I think that whole Sixers squad, it's almost like they've gone down the memory hole, but they were right there, tooth and nail with the Celtics the entire time. And it's just, I don't think they get lost. They've gotten lost in the passage of time. Like you said, it's Jordan Bird. No, not Jordan Bird. It's Magic Bird, but there's definitely more to it. It's just an easy way to remember it, but so much more. So much more is being forgotten.
Yeah, so when you think about this, right, and this lends credence to my point of this being the golden era, you have 4 legitimate cases to make. And when I say legitimate, I mean you're going to have a hell of a time convincing me otherwise, but 4 legitimate cases of teams that are in the top 10, all from that one decade. You have the 76ers, as you pointed out, with Moses Malone, Dr. J, Andrew Toney, Maurice Cheeks, Bobby Jones, I think, was on that team.
Bobby Jones, absolutely. Key player.
So you had that team. You had the Lakers, of course. I would say the 85 team was their best team because that's when Kareem was still very, very productive. Magic, Worthy, Byron Scott, Michael Cooper, let's never forget his name.
Winning in the Boston Garden,
yes.
What an incredible, that is just a phenomenal accomplishment.
Yeah,
I'm partial to 87, but yeah, you're right, 85 and Kareem.
That's when you saw the balls in that team, the guts on that team and the development of that
That's
team.
right. Well, they had just gotten, they'd lost the previous year, and they came out and they really proved that, well, especially Kareem proved that he was not
especially after that Game 1 performance. Let's forget about what actually happened in the series the previous year, but that Game 1, they were killed by 30-something points. You talked about it being mirror images between Bird and Magic. The 84 and 85 series between these two almost mirrored each other. You had the Lakers obviously winning Game 1 of 84 and looking like they were going to be the dominant team, and the Lakers and the Celtics grinding their way and finding a way to win. Flip that around in 85, you had the Celtics winning Game 1, and the Lakers were suddenly the massive underdogs. And the Lakers had to dig deep for the first time in probably all of their careers, by the way. Worthy and Magic and Kareem, they had to really dig deep and find something else to find a way to win. And that's why I think
that's right. They had to get up off the mat. They'd been knocked down, and they had to fight, and they had to overcome so much adversity, especially they had to prove to themselves that they could do this.
There had to be some self-doubt.
There had to be doubts.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. So we've got those three teams. Then we've got, of course, the bad boy Pistons, who don't get talked about. Look, man, they were that crazy Larry Bird steal and the phantom Paul and Kareem with Isaiah, scoring 20.
That didn't happen.
Of course it happened. Come on, man. That was a pretty good call. Kareem initiated all that contact with his offense.
Oh, I know. It was a phantom.
Yeah. So
I do think Dennis Rodman for pulling up for that 18-footer.
Yeah, what the hell is that? No one ever talks about that. My goodness, that was a Draymond Green play right there. But honestly, that you take those two plays away, and they could have easily have won 4 straight titles. I mean, think about that.
What a team that was. Oh my goodness. They were so balanced, and you got Isaiah doing it all.
And Chuck Daly is the coach. There's a reason Chuck Daly, not Phil Jackson, not Pat Riley, not Casey Jones, or Billy Cunningham, or any of those guys. There was a reason that Chuck Daly was named head coach of the Olympic team. That tells you everything. And as you were saying, the talent. I mean, there has never been more defensive depth on a basketball team than that Detroit Pistons team. Ever.
Well, yeah, but they were pretty damn good on all. I mean, they didn't score a lot, but they had so much, like, from, what was it, 10 players deep? I don't know.
Yeah, it had to be close. They had 10 guys that could really hurt you, because you also had Rick Mahorn, you had John Sally, you had Bill Laimbeer, you had Joe Dumas, who was Finals MVP.
I love Joe Dumars, man. He's one of my sneaky favorites.
Yeah,
love that guy.
You so like good. Him on your team?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I've got no doubts with that. He played hard, man. He was a smart player, and I liked it when Grant Hill came and played for the Pistons in the twilight of Joe Dumas' career, and how he sort of helped Grant Hill in his transition into the NBA, and that's a sign of a great player. But the point I wanted to make, really, before we get off track with Joe Dumas, is you got 4 teams that you can make a legitimate case for that they're in the top 10 teams in NBA history. Tell me another era where you've got that. I mean, you got the 90s, obviously the Bulls. Both of those versions of those teams that won 3 titles, because they're very different teams. I'll grant you that. Well,
the Bulls dominated that decade like no one. And Jordan, the argument has been made that the death of Len Bias really prevented.
Oh my God, yeah, I didn't even think of that.
Prevented
man. And also
the
Reggie
Celtics
Lewis, man.
from having. Oh yeah, but I'm saying, like, if we talk about Bird Magic, some people have hypothesized. I don't know whether he was quite that good. I've seen video of him in college, but Len Bias, there's some thought that he could have been the guy that created another rivalry between Jordan, the guy who, I mean, the Pistons essentially fulfilled the same role that the Celtics did for the Lakers early part, like 84. The Pistons beat the shit out of Jordan, Jordan rules, got the rules changed. Like Wilt said, they didn't change the rules to make it easier for me, as far as an advantage for Jordan. I think if Jordan would have had, he probably would have destroyed whoever came across him after what the Pistons did to him. He was taking no prisoners.
But here's the scary thing about Len Bias. Red Auerbach to me is a basketball genius. He knows what he's doing. And I've read a lot of quotes because the Cavs had the number 1 pick and they took Doherty from UNC with the number 1 pick. Yep. And the reason was not too dissimilar to what the Blazers, when the Blazers took Sam Bowie ahead of MJ. We need to build around a center.
We need a center. Height.
Yeah, we need a center. We need a center. We need a center without any questions.
Conventional wisdom,
sure.
Right? Even if they've got a broken feet.
Yeah, or multiple broken. I don't know how many times he broke his foot in college. But the point that I wanted to make is when Red Auerbach knew that the guy wasn't a good player, he just he was a genius when it came to evaluating basketball talent. And let's use
very true. I wouldn't bet against Red Auerbach. The guy,
he spoke so highly of Len Bias prior to the draft and after drafting. He was convinced because teams were making offers, and if he wanted to exploit that into 4 or 5 draft picks and solidify their depth for the next 15 years, just like Danny Ainge, for example, he would have done so.
Yep.
But he was so sold on Len Bias being the next dominant guy. Look, man, I'm not into the whole romanticizing. It's a tragic thing that he died, but I'm not into the whole romanticizing that he would have been the next. He would have been better than Jordan. Some people even say that, right? But I cannot argue when I hear what a true titan of the sport in Red Auerbach was saying about him, because keep in mind they could have brought him along so slowly. You know what I mean? It could have been what. We talk about what could have happened with Carmelo and the Pistons had they brought him in. Times it by 15, 20. That could have been it.
Fucking the human victory cigar.
Yeah,
right.
Darko. We couldn't even think of his name. But times it by 50, and that's what, because you're talking about maybe the greatest team of all time, the 86 Celtics. Maybe the greatest team of all time. Personally, I think the 80...
Let's say, I don't know about 86 being their best team. Oh, I guess because of Walton.
Yeah, of course, with Walton, they just tore up teams, man. So you add in a crown jewel of a talent, maybe not in terms of what he would develop to, but in terms of raw talent. You add that into that environment, with being exposed to Larry Bird and learning from Larry Bird, learning what it's not like he's going to as you said, the Clippers or something like that, where there's bad habits everywhere and he's going to have to win in spite of that. He's going to have a leg up because he's going to be learning from Bird. My goodness, what could have happened there?
And just imagine how much wind that would take out of your sails.
Oh yeah.
To just as a team, he may not have been on the same level of Jordan. We'll never know that, but God, I just think that must have just really sort of sucked the air out of that's got to hurt, because this guy was supposed to be the bridge into the future.
Yeah.
And obviously losing Reggie Lewis sucked too, but Len Bias was maybe the greatest what if. Because that would have meant the potential relevancy for the Celtics. What was their championship gap? The last one was in 2006 to the 2008. KG, Paul Pierce, 2008. So that's
over 20 years, yeah. And for
that 20
franchise,
years gap.
For that franchise, that's a lot.
Well, yeah. I mean, he could have been the bridge that could have gotten them a title or two during that drought, but he's gone.
Yeah.
It's a great what if. Like you said, Auerbach, tremendous evaluator of talent. And we'll just never know. But the other thing about that 87 Celtics squad is Kevin McHale was playing on a broken foot the entire playoffs and even into the regular season. But those guys, no matter what hits kept coming, they fought through it, and they just unfortunately just didn't have the I think Walton had sort of wound down.
Yeah, he was not the player. 80, he put everything he had. That gas tank was bone dry after that 86 season. But it's when you look back at that, you kind of think what went wrong with basketball. At least I think that.
What since that period?
Well, Jordan and Hakeem and those guys, and to a lesser extent Shaq and Kobe, they kept that intensity and that excellence up. for maybe
and the
not
Spurs, Tim Duncan, absolutely.
Yeah,
you gotta
I'll throw his
there.
name in there and that team in there too, sure. But then you look at what's happened today in today's game. This is why I think the decision had such big ramifications for the game, because that kind of changed everything. It's like, what's the easy way out? It's not like, it just made me wonder then, because you talked about Kevin McHale playing with a broken foot, all the stuff that Larry Bird was playing through. Or the fact that Magic had to deal with everything that he had to do, like a transformation of the roster and the coach. People forget about that. Pat Riley was fired, and they brought in Dunleavy to be their coach. He had to deal with that. And you think about even Hakeem Olajuwon, some of the trials and tribulations that he had to go through. I mean, my God, they won from the 6th seed. The 6th seed. Can you imagine that? And that's in the West.
Never questioned the heart of a champion.
One of the
That's all I got to say about that.
One of the great lines in NBA history. But you think about
absolutely.
It's why it's so great is you think about they were the defending champs. You could have made an argument that maybe they were just a transitional champion in '94. In '95, they struggled. They brought in Drexler. They still struggled. They finished 6th in the West. You had 4 50-win teams in the West that year, and including one 62-win team, which was the Spurs. Hakeem was, can you believe this? Hakeem was 3rd team NBA after being the MVP of the league. He was 3rd team All-NBA. Shaq was 2nd team. David Robinson, obviously, number 1, 1st team. They go through Karl Malone in the first round, and Stockton. Let's not forget Stockton. They go through Barkley in the second round. Both of their series, they were down. They were down 2-1 in the first round, so they had to face 2 elimination games because it's best out of 5. The next round, they're down 3-1. They had to face 3 elimination games. Then they roll up into San Antonio. David Robinson is given the league MVP award right in front of the reigning MVP. And Olajuwon,
I love that.
Olajuwon just, Robert Horry has a great story about that. And he goes, after they're finished warming up and they go, they're doing it at center court and everything. It's not like this ridiculous awards show that they've tried to concoct now. After the season.
A press conference and
not even the press conference. So they've got like this stupid award show. It's like the Emmys or something.
I was trying to feed you another line to bash a certain someone.
Look, I'm trying to be respectful here. I'm trying to be appreciative of what I have. Don't hate, Matt. Don't hate.
Yeah.
No, but
go for it.
But Robert Horry said to Olajuwon, walked over to Horry and he goes, "How dare they disrespect me like that?" Oh, I love it. And Horry turned around to his teammates like, "Oh yeah, let's go." He knew right then that they had it. They were the 6th seed, the 6th fucking seed. That is unbelievable. The 6th seed, and they went in there and they won both games in San Antonio. Then they lost the next 2 games in Houston, and then they finished off the series. And then to top that off, they swept Shaq, Penny Hardaway, the same guys that knocked off, albeit a rusty Jordan, but still Jordan. They knocked off Jordan and Pippen. That's the same team. And that team was universally regarded as not just a future championship team, but a future dynasty. People thought that Atlanta Magic team was going to be the Shaq Kobe situation. That's how good. And then Rudy T gets up there and he goes, "Don't ever underestimate the heart of the champion." I'll tell you what, no one ever underestimated the heart of a champion of that group of players ever again.
Well, we still remember it. That's what makes the game so great. Like I said earlier, the game is not played on paper. It's not based on stats. Mm-hmm. It's not based on longevity or games played, or it's based on results. Yes. And it's 5 guys, a coach, an organization, whatever. It's 5 guys out there competing against these guys are at that time period where they're just doing it as hard as they can. The competition level is fierce. This is the ferocity of the 80s and the 90s. I don't think we see that. And one thing I'd like to bring up about that, I've long held the belief that in basketball and maybe life, I don't want to get into too philosophical a debate, but iron sharpens iron. Adversity, going through these challenges brings out the best in players. And this sort of gets to the whole thing, what you said earlier with, packing up versus sticking in there. Mm-hmm. And so there's 2 ways of looking at this, because I look at it, I don't fault players for making a personal decision that benefits them. I can't do that as an employee, as a small business owner myself. But if we're talking about a game, I mean, it is a game. You know, it's not a whole lot different than 2K, except you get live guys and an organization and scouts and coaches and all that shit. But at the end of the day, it's still a game. And it's really... So from a personal perspective, I can't kill the Kevin Durant's and the LeBron James for making these decisions, but I think you've said this many times, and it's taken the whole lifeblood of the sport, the reason why people love it, away.
Yeah.
I just find, like, I don't care anymore. Like,
I'm with you, man.
I'd much rather watch 80s and 90s.
Yeah. No, because if I could expand on it, because there's really strong words what you're saying, I agree with all of it. But if we can expand on it, you think about how basketball, especially the NBA, was built. You know, we talked about it a second ago. We talked about George Mikan, but let's go a little bit closer, a little bit more recent. Not too much more recent, but you think about Bill Russell and the rivalry he had with Wilt Chamberlain. And we really started to see that, like, in terms of, is it stats? What's important? If it's stats or if it's winning? And of course it was winning. It was always winning. Even Wilt said it, wanted to win. And he had, and the proof is in the pudding, because Wilt changed his game to become a winner in Los Angeles. He stopped scoring. My God, look at...
That's what he said.
Yeah, and just look at the stat sheet. He went from averaging, and I'm not talking about for one season, but for pretty much like the first 6 or 7 years of his career, he was averaging around 38 points per game. Not just one season. I mean, we know Jordan averaged for one season 37 a game, but I'm talking about the first 7 or 8 years of his career. He was averaging for 7 or 8 years around 38 points per game, and he realized this is not the way to do it. It wasn't until he became a player that made his teammates better did they knock off Boston and then obviously win another title in 72. Now
see, that's the thing. If I could continue with Wilt for a minute. You know, you were talking earlier about switching players, and you know, if we talk about moving Wilt into the position of any other great center, and every time we did this hypothetical earlier in the week, every time you do that, I just go, oh my God! Just imagine like Shaq exchanging places with Wilt. If Wilt if Wilt was on those early 2000 teams, if Wilt was on today's Golden State Warriors, if you put this man, he was essentially a force of nature. Mm-hmm. That's how great he was individually. And he just happened to run up against this buzzsaw of, 8? How many Hall of Famers did those Celtics teams have?
I believe they had 8 at their peak. Don't quote me on that, but I think it was 8. Yeah.
Well, they had at least, I'm going to say it.
They had Hall of Famers coming off the bench. I mean,
they had Hall of Famers coming off the bench. This is what Wilt was going up against. This is how he
lost.
If
you guys think that it's bad now with Golden State, I mean, you've got 3 bona fide Hall of Famers, maybe 4 on that team of Golden State Warriors. Double that, at least. Double that, and that's what you had with Boston.
On today's Golden State?
Yeah. You've got at least 3 Hall of Famers.
I'd say...
And maybe 4.
Who's the... I mean, I don't know that I would put Clay in that conversation. Definitely wouldn't put Draymond.
Well, he's one... Well, that's why I said maybe 4. So you've got Durant, Curry...
I think
Klay Thompson
definitely
will get in.
those two.
Yeah, I think Klay Thompson will get in.
He might. He's definitely got the potential, but where he's playing now, he could do a lot more. He's essentially coasting, like he's just
I'll
feeding
agree
off.
with that. But Ray Allen made the Hall of Fame, and I don't want to rip on Ray Allen, but Ray Allen, you know, keep in mind Klay Thompson will go.
Oh, I love Ray Allen.
But
Ray Allen had a very big career.
Yeah, but Klay Thompson will go down. He'll probably go down as the number 2 shooter of all time, at least in terms of 3-pointers made in NBA history, behind only his teammate. And then on top of that, he does play good defense. I don't think he's a great defender. I've never bought into that, but he does play good defense. And he'll end up probably... Well, he's already got three titles. I mean, and he's got a gold medal too.
He's essentially... he's the third option. You know? I mean, the guy has got it so easy. And I think he's a good defender. He's not great, but he plays great position defense. He doesn't... He just stays in front of his man. And I told you this before the Rockets series last year. that Clay could cover. Not saying stop, but he could hang with Harden because they've got similar body sizes, and all you really need to do is just move your feet, keep your hands up as best you can. I mean, Harden, it's a bit unfair. Today's rules are very heavily biased towards the offense, probably since the Jordan era. That's been the case, but I like what Clay brings. I like who Clay is as a player, but we just haven't seen anything near his potential because I think he's like the typical stoner. He's very happy, coasting.
He's happy with what it is, but I think that's indicative of the NBA. Now, the point I was going to make, though, with it, I didn't want to turn this into a Klay Thompson, whether he's a Hall of Famer or not, episode. But it's a good discussion. We should have that at some point. But the point I was going to make is the Celtics and the with Russell and Wilt, that rivalry elevated the game, right? In terms of teamwork and importance. The 70s, we really didn't see that next step. I mean, we saw not so much of the importance of winning as it was, we had a dilution, I guess, of talent because you had the ABA come in. But you saw the game become, as Magic described Dr. J, it became vertical. And that was the evolution of the game. It became beautiful to watch. But
right. Exciting even.
Yeah. But the question was still, are you winning? And then that's what brought, a lot of questions around Kareem and other players. How much have you won? Think of the crap that Dr. J had to put up with until he won in the NBA. Forget about what he did in the ABA, because he won, 3 titles in the ABA. But the amount of nonsense that he had to put up, you haven't won in the NBA, you haven't won in the NBA. So there was still an emphasis on winning. And then in the 80s, you saw, obviously, maybe the epitome of that with the 2 best team-orientated superstars in Bird and Magic at the same time, dominating the entire decade. And then, of course, you saw Jordan, maybe the only guy you could put in that conversation with those two in terms of just supremely talented players on both sides of the ball that could lead a team to titles. And then you saw Shaq and Kobe, then you saw Duncan, and that rivalry had its moments. It absolutely did. The Spurs were never a truly dominant team. I mean, they sort of won titles here and there, and they looked great at times during seasons, but they never sustained it for more than one season at a time.
I think they kept alternating championships, as I recall. The fact that they won, Tim Duncan won how many years apart? 17 years apart?
No, he won in 99. And when was the 2014? 14. 13 they lost.
15 years.
Yeah, so that's a hell of an accomplishment, and that speaks volume.
It is.
But then
that's the consistency that he brought to his team.
But the thing I was going to say, though, is when LeBron did the decision, right, and I'm not singling him out, but when he did the decision, we didn't see Jordan when he was losing to the Pistons run to LA to play with Magic. You didn't see him team up with Barkley. You saw him say,
I think that the contract situation and all is much different. It's evolved a lot farther, so...
I mean, that's true. No,
remember John Contract? The first $1 million contract in the NBA.
Yeah, John Contract.
He was a backup center.
Man, John Contract. Was that? Please tell me that was. These names are eluding me right now. I should be shot for that.
I think Chick Hearn.
Yes, Chick Hearn. It had to be Chick Hearn, right? He was the one that came up with Joe Barely Cares as well, right? But the point I was trying to make.
A marvel in his own his own case.
But the point I was trying to make is you saw players do what it took to do whatever it takes to win until the decision. We saw the first real cop out of I can't do this. I'm bailing. I'm going to find an easier way to do it. Now, I see what you're saying, where they're in charge of their careers and they can do what they want. It's a business decision and they're allowed to do that. And that's fine. That's totally fine. No one's saying they can't do it. But you know what? People have to also say, it's bullshit too. I don't like it. And the people... It's
an entertainment industry. That's really...
Sure.
This is the whole thing. They're fans. The fans are the ones who pay the bills. And I know I credit you for this. As much as I can't crucify dudes for making choices, but at the end of the day, who's paying the bills? Who is... you look at the NFL with all the empty seats we're seeing lately. I mean, this is the result. If you're not putting a compelling product, if you're not getting people into the seats, what's the purpose? Like, people aren't going to care about a bunch of guys who are just going through the motions and getting stats and triple doubles
and just manipulating the whole process so they can line up, some kind of fictitious resume. Everyone knows doesn't matter. The whole purpose of playing the sport
doesn't matter, right?
And
that's right.
If you don't do that accordingly, if you don't do that right, then people are going to see through it. People are not dumb. The fans that matter are the paying fans, the fans that actually care about it. You know why they're paying fans? Because they actually watch the damn thing. And then
I've got the sorry to interrupt. I'm just watching the 80. I think it's 81 finals, Eastern Conference Finals with the Sixers. And Celtics.
That's a great series.
And you should see these guys. They're.
Are you watching Game 7?
Bodies are flying. Yes.
Yeah, that's you just pulled that up on YouTube. Watch that. Anyone else who's watching, anyone else who's listening to this podcast who hasn't seen that game, that is one of the great games of all time. Because spoiler alert, I don't think it's okay for me to say spoiler alert because it happened over 30 years ago. But spoiler alert, it's in Boston, and the 76ers were up 3-1, and the Celtics came back to win that series. And it's one of the great series and one of the great Game 7s you'll ever see, and one of the great duels between Dr. J and Larry Bird. It's fantastic. Such a contrast. Because unlike Magic and Bird, where they were, as you accurately described it, Matt, they were mirror images, Dr. J and Larry Bird were not mirror images.
They did not like each other.
No, they did not. They respected the hell out of each other. But, man, that's an underrated part of all this. Larry Bird's trash talk. I can't believe we nearly forgot this. This guy was bad, man. He was my favorite Larry Bird story. I read it in a book by David Halberstam. One of the, in my opinion, the best basketball book I've ever read. It's called Playing for Keeps. And what I loved about that book is, even though Michael Jordan's on the cover, and it's, you would think just by skimming through it.
You're not a Knicks fan, are you?
No, I'm not a Knicks fan. And
that's how Knicks fans would be triggered having Jordan on the cover.
Oh yeah. Well, do Knicks fans still exist? Anyway, but the point that I was going to make though is there is a chapter dedicated to Larry Bird in it. And of all things, you would think about, maybe he'd be talking about the 60-point game or some of the ridiculous things that he did in the playoffs, like the steal or the shot he hit over Magic in the 84 finals. No, he actually was talking about and was recounting a practice. And what happened was, there was after probably a 3-game and 4 nights situation for the Celtics, and the starters were tired, right? So because it was always the starters versus the bench players, and the bench players jumped out to a big lead, and KC Jones started talking a lot of shit to Larry Bird. So Larry Bird starts getting annoyed. He starts raining threes in. He hits a 3, and every single time he hits a 3, he's going further out because they're stepping out to him. They're trying to guard him. Anyway, there's about 4 seconds left, and the starters are still down by 2 points. And Larry Bird gets the ball. He's dribbling down the court, and with about 3 seconds left, he's at half court, and Parrish and McHale, and they are all open underneath the rim, right? Larry Bird pulls up from half court. The entire bench, they knew what was happening, and they were all running at Bird. So all these guys, every other team of his teammates was wide open. He could have passed it off. They at least tie the game or maybe win it. He pulls up from half court and nails it and walks off the court with his finger up in the air, just like he did in the 3-point competition. And I thought there is something incredible about the confidence level for that guy to just picture that. Picture you got Hall of Famers open underneath the basket, and he decides to pull up from half court just as an FU to his coach because his coach is talking shit to him. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, it's outstanding. I mean, talking about Wilt, replacing Wilt with other great players of his time, I'd just love to see Larry Bird in today's game.
Oh, man.
He deserves the recognition. He's a he's an ugly dude, you know, he's not very telegenic or whatever, but the guy would be, as pure basketball player, would just be a joy to watch.
Basketball is not track and field.
You know what? I'm going to tell you something. I've actually got a solution for the NBA's problems, and I just thought of it during our conversation. You got to bring back defense.
Yes. It needs to be competitive on that end of the court.
That's right. Right now, it's like, you know, you remember when Parrish nailed Lambeer for throwing an elbow or whatever.
Yeah, he
didn't get a technical. He got 2 free throws and play on.
I don't even think a foul was called in that situation.
Well, maybe it wasn't, but it's certainly today's game. That would have been possibly a suspension for the rest of the season.
He would have been arrested.
More than likely. You know, the Twitter would have been on fire.
Right.
A Twitter. I just really think, like I said, I'm watching this game, Game 7, 2-point game, 30 seconds to go. Really, we need to see more heart. Less switching on the picks, fight through those picks. You know, give the defender. I don't know. You know, I remember watching last year's finals, and it was even the Western Conference finals, and some of the no calls they gave. You know, Harden legitimately got fouled on some of those, and based upon the history, like what he had been fouls, and then to stop calling them, it was so arbitrary to me. It almost felt like they wanted. I think the Warriors were down at that stage.
They were down.
So there was
3 games to 2. Yeah.
You know, and I just maybe that feeds into the conspiracy, which not necessarily a theory. You could probably argue that it's a conspiracy fact, but the reffing, I just want to see these guys get out there, and let's not penalize the defenders so much. I think ever since the Jordan rules, ever since the 90s, I think we've had this conversation, and you may not agree completely with me, but I do think that the rules now heavily favor the offense.
Oh, they do now. I don't think it was Jordan, because you look at the 90s though, and that was a very physical era too. It was physical all the way really up till probably the emergence
this last decade.
The emergence of Golden State. I mean, the last time you really saw a physical grinding series was maybe 2010 between the Lakers and the Celtics in the finals.
That was a classic.
A classic. I know you're happy about that one.
Well, you know.
Yeah, Laker fan in you, but no, that's fine. It was a beautiful series to watch in terms of just defense, and I don't mind it when offenses dominate. I hate it when it's like the defenders are handcuffed. And
yes.
You know, they're playing.
2014 was an amazing series to watch because of the ball work, the passing, the shooting. Those Spurs squad. That Spurs squad was. Actually goes into the whole. The game is played on the court and not on paper. The year before,
tanks and snipers. Do you want to give that story to the people out there?
I think you tell it better than I do.
I'll save that for towards the end of the show. But continue.
Oh well. The Spurs had that series.
In 2013?
2013. And, you know, a gaff by Popovich.
That's putting it very nicely.
No, it is. I think he's a good coach. I think you maybe have some reservations, but either way.
If I could interject here just quickly, I think he's a great coach. He's on the short list of the greatest coaches in NBA history. However, I would never put him at the top. So if someone says that he's a top 5 coach of all time, I'd say sure. But if they say he's the greatest coach, I will never allow that, because he
reminds me more of like a college coach.
Yeah, it's scary to think that he may have actually been a better college coach than he was in the pros when you look at the success he had. But the reason why I would never sit by while someone calls him the greatest coach, it wasn't just one gaffe. It was 2 of the biggest screw-ups in sports history. People talk about Pete Carroll not running the ball
Yeah.
Imagine if that happened twice. That's exactly why this is so bad. Duncan was on the bench twice. Chris Bosh got offensive rebounds twice off missed threes. That's why. Do
you want to talk about end of game scenarios and do you want to get into that conversation?
Oh, sure. You've got more to throw in there. I mean.
Oh, well, we're talking about bailouts, and Jordan getting bailed out twice. Do you want to go down that path?
Well, I mean, what? You're talking about the Scottie Pippen grabbing the rim? Is that what you're referring to?
No. I'm talking about Paxson. I'm talking about myths that have been perpetuated.
Oh, that's not a myth. He scored all the points in that fourth quarter. Apart from the Paxson 3.
Yeah, well, I'm saying in comparison to Ray Allen's miracle.
Oh, well, that's
based
the difference.
upon not having Duncan in there.
Well, that's.
I'm just in case we have any people who.
Oh, sure. No, I thought you wanted
to. There's.
Look, there's a huge difference. Look, if Jordan had taken that shot in Game 6, first of all, let's establish.
We're talking about against Phoenix.
Yes. So let's first of all establish that the Bulls were up 3-2. So even if Paxson misses that shot, they get a Game 7. If Ray Allen misses that shot, they're done. Okay? First of all, let's establish that. Second of all, LeBron missed the 3, right? He missed the the 3 before it too.
He had a couple of shots there, yeah.
And Chris Bosh got the board and dished it back out to him. He was wide open, then he hit it. And the Spurs kind of fell asleep defensively because I think they were up by 6 or may have been 5 at that stage. Tony Parker hit a massive 3 coming down that stretch that looked like it sealed the deal for them. But if we're going to be fair, right, the equivalent would be if the Bulls were down 3-2, Jordan shooting the ball, and I guess Horace Grant getting the offensive rebound and then dishing it out to Paxson for the 3. That's the difference.
A highly contested 3.
Yes. So that's the difference. Now, the Bulls, if we look at the 93 game, the Bulls, they knew what was coming. They knew that that's why they inbounded the ball to Jordan in the backcourt, because they knew that all of the focus of the Phoenix Suns would be on Jordan. Now, they didn't double yet, but everyone was looking at him. Now, Jordan, as soon as he got by Kevin Johnson in the backcourt, he essentially caught the Phoenix Suns in all of them, not just one of them, but all of them in no man's land. So then he got it out to Pippen. Pippen was being guarded by Barkley, of all people. And then Barkley broke in, dished it to Horace Grant, and now the Phoenix Suns are all over the place. But that also, and then Horace Grant threw it right back out to Paxson, and Paxson drilled the 3.
With 10 feet of daylight.
Yeah, it wasn't even close. And you had B.J. Armstrong in the opposite corner. One of the great reactions, because as soon as Paxson caught the ball, not even shot the ball or released it, or went into a shooting range, but as soon as Paxson caught the ball, B.J. Armstrong fell to the floor with his arms up in celebration. It was fantastic. And it just showed you the difference that, say, Phil Jackson and Michael Jordan had in terms of understanding the game, as opposed to Charles Barkley and Paul Westphal. Because they knew exactly that the Suns would be so focused in stopping Jordan that the moment that he got by Kevin Johnson, they would all start to go towards him, and then you just get it to Pippen. Pippen gets inside. Either Pippen gets a dunk, or they have to rotate and scramble like crazy, and guess where they left open, man? John Paxson. All day.
Knockdown shooter.
All day. But the Steve Kerr one's even better, because he's, that was a bit of me psychoanalyzing, say, well, that Jordan and Phil Jackson were seeing the game ahead of Charles Barkley and Paul Westphal. The Steve Kerr one, once again, the Bulls are up, big difference, and in the series, and obviously Jordan goes to Kerr and he says, look, Stockton's going to come off, he's going to double me, you be ready. When I get it to you, you shoot it. And, as sure as anything could be, that's exactly what happened. People want to fap religiously to LeBron reciting what happened after the fact. Jordan actually completely predicted it to Kerr, and Kerr knocked it down. And Kerr actually says what Jordan said to him relaxed him so much that he was very confident in taking that shot, because he knew what was coming. He didn't have to panic. He knew what was about to happen.
That's right. He was mentally prepared.
Absolutely. He was able to get the ball to Jordan, and he knew, like, if you've ever played any sport, if you've ever done anything in your life, when people tell you, okay, you don't have to react in a split second, you have time to prepare yourself, you know what you need to do, you can relax yourself and calm yourself down, and you know what is required. It's a lot easier to do it like that.
Yes, absolutely.
But I don't know how we got off. Yeah.
Well, I was just talking about the. We were talking about Duncan and the
gas. Yeah. So the point that I would make with Popovich before we get back and finish up the show is if we're talking about the biggest screw ups in sports history, and obviously Pete Carroll's one is up there, but I think Popovich's one is worse because it happened back to back plays. He should have learnt from the first one, like, hey, we're trying to get defensive stops. How do we... Okay, we can make him miss as many times, but if we're not cleaning up the glass, it's not a defensive stop.
Well, yeah, why don't we have our best rebounder on the floor? And then we have one less champion.
Out of Kawhi Leonard. They would have 6, my God, and they would have their repeat.
Well, they probably would have not been as motivated to have won 2014. That was just such a, God, we really let this get away. I can't believe we lost that. That must have been their mindset. It would have really focused them to come back. Sort of 1984 with the Lakers. Oh my God, we should have won. We were the better squad, and then they come out and win in Boston Garden, and then lose in the first lose to Houston the following year. But that's besides the point.
I think we've finally reached the point where we can disagree on something, Matt, because they actually had both hands on the title, the Spurs. And it had been a while since they'd won. The previous time they had won was, I think, 2007. So it had been 6 years from 2007 to 2013. I've never seen a heartbreaking loss. And you look at, say, Seattle, the Seahawks, right? They probably had their hands on the Super Bowl when they thought, well, we're on the 1 yard line. We got Marshawn Lynch. But they lost, and they never recovered. A lot of times, teams don't recover like that. So the fact that they were able to recover, I think that was in spite of them losing. Had they had won in 2013, I would have... And maybe you're right, man, because history says that they don't repeat, the Spurs. But it takes a hell of a mental effort. And this is the flip side of Popovich, because he was able to regroup them. And they're actually very competitive in Game 7 too. Let's not forget that. But, yeah, man, I could see it going either way. I reckon they're 50-50 chance. If they had won in 2013, it's 50-50 that they win in 2014. I also think, I'll also go as far to say that had they had lost in 2013, and if they were 1 and 2, that maybe the big three gets broken up. Wade stays, LeBron stays, maybe Bosh gets traded for somebody.
Yeah, more than likely. That would make sense.
I mean, I could see that happening, man. I could see... I'm not sure where he would get traded to at that particular time. Maybe New York for Carmelo, and if you throw in a few other pieces at the time, because Carmelo wasn't a bad player, obviously. But...
just a ball hog.
Yeah, just apart from that, But, it's...
3 ball-dominant guys on one team. I'm not sure how that would work out. I mean, Bosh really sacrificed the most
he did, man. He absolutely
all of those guys.
I cannot praise him higher. The sacrifices he made for that team, not just in terms of, as you said, to lessen his role, but to change his role. And
talk about doing what the team needs.
Yes,
that's exactly what he did.
Yeah, he's a throwback, man, and he's it's sad that he's totally forgotten. And people, once again, he's another player whose career was cut short too from a health standpoint. Matt,
yeah, very true.
You got any other final thoughts here?
Well, I just one thing I've been keeping in my mind during our conversation, we were talking about switching. I think it's sort of be interesting, and this may be mostly because I'm a Laker fan, but I think Worthy and Dominique were drafted right around the same time. So I've always wondered what it would have been like. I'm not sure if Worthy could have done what Dominique did as far as being a focal point of a team. But
let me ask you this. Let me ask you this. So we just praised Chris Bosh for the sacrifices that he made. Can we not apply that same logic and rationale to Worthy for the sacrifices he made?
Well, he did make sacrifices, but I think when I think back on Worthy, he was a great finisher, excellent offensive rebounder, good defender. His ball handling was suspect. I sort of picture him. You know, he had this sort of stilted, almost. I don't think he could have done the same. The team would have been different with him. And then you've got Dominique on the other end with his individual brilliance. As far as I recall, Dominique got his own shots. Worthy, he wasn't as effective.
No, I see what you're saying. Like, there were times where, especially when Worthy was the Finals MVP, you would remember this, when he was Finals MVP, I think it was 87, was it? Or 88? No, it was 88, I think.
Was it 88?
It was one of those 2 years. I was up against the Celtics, so I think it was 87, and he was just tearing them up.
Yeah.
And they weren't really creating shots for him. They were creating space for him, and they were clearing out for him plenty of times. But they were actually clearing out and just
he was going up against McHale
and Bird. They had no answer for him at that stage. So look, they're different players, Dominique and Worthy. You know this, but they had different roles. And I honestly think I would feel more confident in saying that Worthy would have been not as dominant or dominating the same way as what Dominique did, but I think he would have been able to carry a team to some relative success as what Dominique Wilkins did individually in Atlanta. I'd be more confident.
Yeah, because he was really good. I mean, he had the duels with Bird, and he's sort of underrated. I mean, he obviously didn't enjoy the same success, but he was definitely one of the best players of the 80s. The 80s.
Yeah, without question. And we forgot him. So, bad, Matt. I'm referring to myself, not you. But when we're talking about the great teams of the 80s, that was a talented team. But
yeah,
I would be more confident in saying
not quite there.
I'd be more confident in saying that Worthy could have filled the Dominique role as opposed to Dominique filling the Worthy role, if that makes sense.
Well, it certainly worked. I mean, Worthy was a perfect piece on that Lakers squad. He gave them the athleticism on the perimeter without being overly, he just took what he was given, you know, and in the individual brilliance of Dominique, I think, would have been stifled in that circumstance because, Magic, what would Dominique would essentially just be a finisher.
Well, that's the other side of it too. Like, Magic was such a genius. He probably would have figured out exactly how good Dominique was, and man, that could have been, the Len Bias situation for the Lakers had they got Dominique. I mean, Jesus, like we saw what Dominique was able to do without Magic. Imagine how good Magic would have made him look.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things I've often thought of is, look, we've talked about this. Like, great basketball players are able to adapt, and what could they have done in different situations? And it is sort of unfair. I suppose I have been a bit unfair to both players in that regards because I'm sure they would have found a way to make it work.
The other side, and I'll leave this question with you, and I'll let you respond, and we'll finish up the show, is had they gotten Dominique, and he's obviously, Worthy was great at filling the lanes. There's no question about it. One of the great rim runners of all time.
Devastating.
But Dominique may have been one of the few guys that was actually better than him. Now, had they gotten Dominique instead of Worthy, would that have accelerated the process in terms of pressuring Kareem to retire? Because maybe at that point they're like, we need to run more, and we cannot run more with Kareem slowing us down.
That's right. I mean, and imagine how exciting that would be. I mean, those you talk about GP and Kemp.
Jesus, I didn't even think of that.
The next level.
That would be fantastic. You know what? That'll be great. Next time we get you on, man, we'll talk about that because that'd be something special. That would have been really something special. And we talk about the what ifs and everything. When it comes to Len Bias, but what if, say, Kareem retired, Magic never gets HIV, and you've got Dominique and Magic in LA up until, say, 93, 94? Like, Jesus.
And Bird hires a contractor to do his mother's private.
Yeah, exactly. That works as well. I mean, Jesus, man. Jesus. Like, what is
Len Bias lives.
Yeah, Reggie Lewis lives. Yeah. Kevin McHale doesn't break his foot. Yeah, like.
Those are.
Does Jordan even get 2 titles in that situation? If all those happens, does Jordan even get 2 titles? Maybe.
Well,
probably.
the three-peat would have been in jeopardy, wouldn't it? But
the first one would have been, yeah. But
yeah.
Do the bad boy Pistons? Do they get a title? Probably not. Realistically, they could. But
that was a hell of a team. I'd have a hard time seeing them not winning any at all. But definitely, I'd say it's easy to say that the loss of Bias, really, they really
it can't be understated. No, I get what you're saying. Yeah, it's exactly. As I said before, it's not like somebody saying that Greg Oden would have been such and such. When you got Red Auerbach getting up there and saying no, he was going to be as good as advertised, if not better, then it's like shit. You really got to pay attention to that when Red Auerbach says that. But Matt, this has been a fantastic conversation. I'd like to get you back on the show for my 100th episode, which is coming up relatively soon. We're on to episode 93. Thank you so much for coming on.
Pleasure.
And I've got a inner circle, so to speak, of people that I get on regularly. You're one of them, so I'd like to get you back on. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. Matt, do you have any final comments?
No, I'm just. It's been a blast. Time's flown by. I hope people are. Hope we covered some ground. I think we have that a bit thought provoking that maybe people hadn't thought of in a while. So that's my hope to just remember things aren't always new. Isn't always better.
I think that's a good way to finish it, man. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you on episode 94.